Thanks everybody who's joined us today. Really excited to talk about NIL and academic eligibility. All right, well, happy Wednesday, everybody. I'm Joyce Anderson, co-founder of Honest Game, and we are so excited to have Eccker Sports and Tim Prukop joining us to talk about name, image, and likeness, NIL, as a lot of people are referring it to. It's a really hot topic in college and now high school sports, and we're really excited to talk about the basics and how you can get your student athletes set up for success. So the first thing we always want to talk about before we get to NIL is academics, because the truth is, if you're not academically eligible to play, it's really unlikely that you're going to get any NIL benefits. So Honest Game is your academic eligibility software and training provider for high schools. Note, if you have any questions, please type them into the Q&A box, and we are definitely reserving a lot of time at the end of this session to answer your questions. So if you're at a school or you've got student athletes at a school, at a high school, things that you want to make sure you're taking care of. Your NCAA Eligibility Center portal, every high school has their own account, and there needs to be 2 high school administrators in charge of that account, submitting fee waivers, responding to NCAA tasks for specific students and courses, and uploading transcripts for eligibility review. With your NCAA Eligibility Center portal, you want to make sure that the classes being offered at your school are getting approved properly, that you've got your AP and honors weights, that you've got your grade scale, that your virtual learning curriculum and credit recovery classes are getting appropriate approvals, and also if you have any outstanding classes that need review and additional documentation, is that documentation being submitted? We're going to cover really basic NCAA eligibility requirements because you got to make sure that your kids are tracking properly. So the NCAA rules haven't changed much over the years. There was a COVID waiver that's still in effect for your class of 2023 entering college full-time, and we'll see what happens with the NCAA SAT requirement come January when they vote on it. But currently, you got to meet those minimum requirements for Division I and Division II, and then Division III has no eligibility requirements, but you're required to be admitted into the college. So when we ask about NCAA courses, what does that mean? Your high school courses need to meet these specific requirements for your college prep, granted graduation credit, taught by a qualified instructor in specific subject areas, and taught at a regular academic level. But the crux of it is, just because you've got core courses that you're offering doesn't mean they're NCAA approved. So they need to be submitted by your NCAA Eligibility Center admin, and then they need to be approved by the NCAA for NCAA credit. And then you take it down another level, and we're talking about each student's individual NCAA core GPA, which is based on those core classes that are taken and completed. And here are some real life examples of students who either thought they were eligible but were not, or thought they were ineligible when they were actually eligible. And so what we want to make clear is that your school GPA is different from your NCAA GPA, and it's not always what you think it is. So you want to make sure we're doing the math and checking each student athlete to make sure they're on track. I wanted to make a note about NAIA. They recently changed their requirements to waive test scores if students have a 2.3 minimum school GPA at graduation. However, they don't meet those requirements, then we go back to the old requirements, which is the 2 out of 3 criterion. And if you don't have class rank, then you got to meet the GPA and the SAT or ACT requirement. And just to be clear, this NAIA GPA is your high school GPA, whereas the NCAA GPA requirement is a different type of GPA that requires some calculation. When we talk about college athletics, we always want to talk about all the different opportunities available to your student athletes. It's not just D1 or bust. There are so many 4-year, 2-year opportunities, many of which provide additional financial aid for athletics. And even the ones that don't provide athletic financial aid often provide a lot of need, merit-based financial aid that students can supplement to ensure that they can find that best fit college for athletics, academics, and financial. This is one of our examples of content we will provide to our school partners. You can download it by putting your camera on that QR code there, but it's a great one-sheeter that we've got counselors putting up next to their computers in their office. We've got ADs and coaches keeping them on their phones or in their offices just to check off, like, okay, I'm meeting with a sophomore year. Let me check off and make sure they're, meeting these requirements to keep them on that right pathway for the college athletic post-secondary plan. And so what Honest Game can do for you is a number of things. So we've got software tracking all of your student athletes, and you click in and you see this dashboard. You can see immediately red, yellow, green, who's eligible for which divisions. And then each student gets an individualized report. It's private, but they can download it and share it during the recruiting process. It's tracking every little piece of eligibility requirement for each division, and they can toggle across all the different divisions to understand and educate themselves. We've been told this is one of the most parent guardian friendly softwares anyone's ever seen. It empowers you to really know what's next and ensures that that student's village is educated and knows what to do starting freshman year every step of the way. So we are your in-house academic eligibility specialists. We're going to save you time, improve student academic eligibility outcomes, diversify your post-secondary athletic opportunities. We can do training modules for your staff, counselors, coaches, families, because what our goal is to increase opportunity and make sure every student athlete has the opportunity available to them if it presents itself. And the segue here into NIL is just a reminder, without academic eligibility, you're likely not going to be able to take advantage of your NIL. And so now I'm going to kick it off to Tim to take it over.
Great. Thanks, Joyce. It's great to be here. Like Honest Game, Eccker Sports is dedicated to helping educate high school administrators, coaches, student athletes, and their families on all of the evolving issues around name, image, and likeness. And Joyce has control of the slides, so I'll ask her to switch to the next slide. And so since June of 2021, the world has changed dramatically for the high school market as it relates to name, image, and likeness. As of today, 19 states high school athletic associations have approved that high school athletes could profit from their name, image, and likeness and maintain their eligibility to play high school sports as well. The rest of the states, if you go to the next slide, Joyce, this will show the slides, and this is where we are today. So all of the states that are listed in green here allow high school athletes to participate in name, image, and likeness and maintain their eligibility. The states that are in yellow currently do not permit NIL for the high school market, but they are in consideration of making changes. We know Nevada and Pennsylvania are likely going to be the next two that come on board. And at Eccker Sports, we're working with 10 different state high school athletic associations across the country, helping them kind of navigate their way through this process. Next slide, please. And so the important concepts in terminology, just to make sure everybody's on the same page. On the left, the reason that we had the landmark Supreme Court ruling last year was that there was a lawsuit that made the claim that the NCAA was profiting off of the name, image, and likeness of student athletes, but the athletes themselves were not able to participate. And when the Supreme Court looked at it, they ruled that, in fact, the NCAA's requirement that you had to be an amateur in order to participate in NCAA sports was a violation of the Sherman Act, which is an antitrust regulation that said that the NCAA was being unconstitutional in that requirement because they were controlling the value of what somebody could potentially make. And so that was what happened, a summer ago. And on the right, what the NCAA said was, we are not going to have the ability to govern this. This is going to have to come down to each state's individual state laws and or the way that they're going to operate within those states. But there were three things that the NCAA wanted to be very specific about, which I think is important for this conversation. The first is that student athletes weren't paid for play, meaning you don't get paid, you can't pay a student athlete for participating in an athletic competition. You can't pay a student athlete for success in a competition or how they perform. So that was the first thing. The second thing they said was that you could not use NIL money to induce an athlete to come to a school. So, if the NCAA said it was that would be an improper inducement. And then the third piece, they wanted to reinforce that third parties outside of the athletic department at a university are not allowed to participate in the recruiting process of a student athlete. And this is really important if you have student athletes that are being recruited today, that make sure that they understand that if somebody outside of the coaching staff or the university is calling them or reaching out to them, if the NCAA determines that that actually occurred, that could cause a problem with their eligibility if the NCAA determines that that was an infraction. Two other key points: intellectual property, right? Intellectual property means anything that we create as an individual that we want to maintain the rights to. And as we think about name, image, and likeness, you're seeing a lot of student athletes and a lot of folks that they're moving towards trying to copyright and trademark those things. Let's go to the next slide, Joyce. So the trends that we see, how are student athletes taking advantage of name, image, and likeness opportunities? One is to promote local corporate businesses. So at some of the smaller schools and across the states where high school athletes are being able to participate, we're seeing a lot of local businesses get involved and hire athletes to be brand ambassadors or to be representatives of them. Some athletes are creating their own products and their own merchandise. Appearances is a really pretty common thing for more notable athletes to go up and do autograph sessions, go to camps and help coach young athletes and things like that. The payment in kind compensation is something else that we see a lot, where shoe companies, apparel companies, companies like Beats, as you notice, that lots of times they will be giving the athletes those payment in kind compensation. And then the collectives, just to touch on that for just 1 second, collectives are formed by third-party entities like booster clubs, alumni, and groups of people that want to support an athletic department. They create their own LLC, set up their own organization, get their own money donated into that organization, and then out of that, they will go work with student athletes, give them opportunities to do one of the 4 things that we saw here, whether that be promoting a corporate entity, whether that be appearing somewhere, doing autographs and things like that. And when they do that, then the student athletes are able to then earn money because of those activities. And so that's how those things have been set up. Let's go to the next slide. So the things to consider, I think these are the 5 things that we talk a lot about with a lot of the student athletes that we work with, as well as the administrators. Number 1 is make sure before you sign any contract that you have legal representation review the agreements. We've seen lots of agreements that had no termination dates in them. So effectively, an entity would come in, sign up a sponsorship deal between an athlete and some entity that they want them to represent, with no determined end time to that agreement. So likely, if that athlete was to participate and do well, they could maintain some claim on that athlete, without any ability for the athlete to get out of that requirement, which may affect them down the future. So things like that are very important. Also, the limited liability and indemnification and those types of things that normally occur in those agreements, it's really important to have an attorney look at legal agreements. The second thing is that any money or any value that you get in kind over $400 is taxable. And so the athletes need to make sure that if they are collecting that money, that they're taking money and setting it aside. Predominantly, this comes through the form as a contractor, where they'll receive a 1099. If it's at the high school or college level, the student athlete normally needs to then report that deal to their athletic department so that they can track it as well. But make sure that you're understanding that if you are getting paid, that money is going to be tracked and taxes will be due. On the recruiting visits, again, every state is different. Every state law is different. For example, in the state of Texas, coaches at athletic departments cannot talk to prospective student athletes about name, image, and likeness opportunities, whereas in states like Alabama, Ohio, and California, that they can. So so we need to understand what are the specific state laws in each state where you're being recruited, so you know what is or is not permissible to have conversations about. Financial aid. So an NIL deal is just like any other job. It won't prevent you from getting scholarships. It won't prevent you from financial aid, but it can affect your eligibility for financial aid and Pell Grants, because the amount of money that's earned there will get attached to the expected family contribution number for those things. So make sure that we understand if we take a $2,000 NIL deal and that puts us over the cap for our Pell Grant, it may cost us, $30,000 during the course of my college career. So those are things to understand as well. And then image and branding. One thing that we spend a lot of time talking about is having to make sure that student athletes are intentional about how they go ahead and create their brand so that it's representative of who they are today. It can be effective for them in the future, and they don't connect themselves to brands that may be problematic for what they're trying to do throughout their life. Next slide. And so what Eccker Sports does is we have an NIL playbook platform. It includes video courses that go through all of the details about the history of NIL, all of those core components that we talked about, things to think about, checklists, what to do about taxes, finances, legal, and recruiting, and then some information on branding. We also provide a resource hub which has state-by-state vetted information, the largest collection of information about name, image, and likeness anywhere in the country. And it's vetted and updated on a daily basis by a team of experts who wake up with the sole purpose of keeping our partners up to date on what's going on with name, image, and likeness. And then we have several coach and parent assist tools, and these are frequently asked question documents, one-pagers, financial information documents, and other things that we get asked by people who are looking for things that they can give to people to help them through their process. All of that's available as a member of the Eccker Sports NIL Playbook platform, which is an annual membership. Next slide. And so I think to kind of finish off the conversation, the 2 limited time offers for all of the great folks that are with us today on this webinar. From Eccker Sports, the normal membership fee for that NIL Playbook membership is $50 a year. If you sign up within the next 2 weeks by clicking on that QR code and using the webinar 25 in the promo code, you can take advantage of a 50% discount on a membership, and we'd love to see you there. Joyce, I'll let you explain your promotion.
Thanks, Tim. That was awesome. I learned so much. Honest Games offer is 10% off your school contract or your individuals. If you're a parent on and you're listening and you want to track your student athletes eligibility, you can do that as a one-year subscription, or you can also, as an athletic director or counselor, buy this for your entire school of student athletes. And what we're trying to do here is encourage you all to be proactive, right, in both environments, right, with NIL and with academic eligibility, to make sure we're not falling to cracks and making mistakes that are going to affect our student athletes' future. So now we're going to work on the Q&A and answer some questions. So if you haven't already, you can put it into the chat. I think we had one question. Where can I find the information on each state law or high school regulation?
Great question. Thank you for that question. So if you go to eckersports.com, ECCKER sports.com, there's a yellow button on the right-hand side that says Resource Hub. If you click on that Resource Hub, it will actually pull up the state-by-state information. You can go, it's an interactive map. You click on the map and it opens the map up and it gives you the state laws, the high school association bylaws, and any other pertinent information as it relates to that. If your players are not the top players on your team or recognized, anybody can participate in name, image, and likeness. We see there's a student athlete who's a second string wide receiver at Bixby High School in Oklahoma. He's got 1.2 million TikTok visitors because he does some interesting dance compositions. Every time he posts on TikTok, he makes over $10,000 from advertisement and sponsorship. So NIL is not just for the top athletes. The way that we kind of think of it, there's three groups. There's the elite athletes, so that's the LeBron James, the Bryce Youngs, and those guys who, they're always going to operate on a different level. Then you've got the majority of NIL deals, which are student athletes that are not at that level, that are doing things in their community that benefit their community and benefit local businesses, and they get and they participate. And then there's another group of high school athletes that are just starting to build their digital presence to figure out how they can become influencers and figure out how they can participate in name, image, and likeness.
Tim, what are the benefits of joining with NIL versus NCAA? One of the questions.
I think, was that NIL or was that NAIA?
It says NIL.
Well, I would, to me, so the reason that the NCAA removed its criteria for amateurism to be able to play in college athletics is because the Supreme Court said they couldn't control what a student athlete could earn. The result of that has been the opportunity for student athletes to be able to earn and monetize while they're in universities and take advantage of their notoriety. And so I think everybody believes that that's a good thing for the student athletes. The challenge right now is that there's no real guidelines to govern who does what or whatever. So it's a little bit challenging for those people.
Awesome. There's a question about if you are interested in getting on a scheme for your district, are there criteria needed for setup? So we work with all different types of high schools, from one high school to districts that have 6 high schools to 87 high schools. And the only criteria needed is that you are servicing high school students, and you either have a transcript, which every high school has, or student information systems that can export data. You don't take self-report. So that's how it would get set up.
That's great. Christine Stevenson wanted to make sure that I reminded everybody that it's not just $400 in cash that would be something that would have a reporting requirement, but any type of value in kind. Her example is if an athlete gets invited to a steakhouse and gets to bring 10 friends and the total value of that dinner was over $400, that would also count as something that you would need to keep track of from a tax perspective and report on your tax returns annually.
Awesome. So Tim, the next question is 2 parts. How are Canadian athletes affected by NIL and NCAA? So I'll take the NCAA, and you want to take the NIL on Canadian?
Yeah, go, once you take the NCAA first, yeah.
Okay. So Canadian athletes are bound by NCAA requirements, academics. Each province has its own list of codes of courses that are NCAA approved. So you want to make sure that your student athletes in Canada are meeting those NCAA requirements for initial eligibility, and we're happy to help out. We do actually work with a number of Canadian schools and academies, so happy to help out if you need support in tracking those students.
Yeah, and the right now the NIL regulations and the stuff that's going on in the United States pertains to U.S. citizens only, as it relates to their constitutional right. Each university has its own policies and procedures as it relates to those student athletes. So I would refer you to the policies and procedures for each individual university to understand what their responsibility is as it relates to international athletes. But from the perspective of the way that this has all been run out over the course of the year, international student athletes have not been able to participate in name, image, and likeness as of yet. And there's another question about the payment in kind. So when you think about the value of something that you earn, whether it's cash money or somebody gives you a gift or somebody does something for you because of something that you've done or who you are, any of those ways that you can create value for yourself are things that could potentially become taxable. So, for example, if Beats gives me a pair of gives me a set of headsets that are worth $500, then when I claim taxes at the end of the year, I've got to report that I had a $500 value in that thing that they gave me. The example of the steakhouse was if I took 10 of my friends to a steakhouse and had a $1,000 bill that somebody else covered, like a booster or a local business or that steakhouse provided to us at no cost, that $1,000 of value, which we earned or took advantage of because of my name, image, and likeness, would also be something that would be taxable. There's a question: can student athletes be paid through their own LLC instead of directly to them? And the answer is yes. Just like any other business or entity in the United States, a individual can set up their own corporation, their own partnership, their own S corp, whatever is most beneficial for their certain status, and then the contracts between the sponsors or the advisor or the companies that want that person's endorsement would be between that company and the LLC formed by that organization. And then that organization would have to report all the taxes, et cetera, just like anybody else would have to.
Hey, Tim, just to follow up on that. So if a student creates an LLC, and they're the sole owner of that LLC, does the value they earn that LLC translate to them having that, value applied to them when looking at financial aid?
I would think it does, yes. I would think it does.
Legally, right? Like you pierce the corporate veil, like you're the only person. So when the federal government is reviewing your assets, they're still going to probably
because they're associated to you, the owner of that LLC, right? And so all of the different ways that you earn money accrue against whatever your tax liability would be. Let's see. For Tim, how do you see the NIL impacting high school sports, assuming private schools, alumni donors will have more resources than public schools? Do you see this being an issue? That's a really good question. The main concern at the high school level as it relates to name, image, and likeness is competitive equity. Everyone is concerned that if you allow for name, image, and likeness, that schools that have more resources than schools that don't might have an advantage there, and kids may transfer from one school to the other. So yes, that is a concern. What the states that we're working with are doing is they're preventing kids from utilizing school logos, school marks, school facilities, and things like that as part of their NIL deals to help try to prevent that. And they're applying their normal anti-recruiting, anti-inducement rules to anything that has to do with NIL as well. But yes, that is something that everybody is concerned about. Joyce, I think there's one last one for you.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Before I move on, I just want to make a note that, if you're planning on jumping around from school to school for whatever reason, if it's NIL or getting more playing time or whatever that is, please make sure that that school offers NCAA approved classes, because we've had kids switching schools and then realizing after a whole year being there that none of the classes they took actually count towards their NCAA eligibility. And they went from being a D1 qualifier to a non-qualifier after 1 year because they didn't have enough time to catch up. So just be careful about that. For Joyce, are you both working with student athletes to address mental health issues? Absolutely. So actually, Honest Game put on a webinar this past summer on mental health in student athletes and how it's different in student athletes than it is versus your general population of students. And we're happy to share that recording with you if you haven't been able to catch it. We had a PhD and a counselor / former college coach speaking to those student athletes' experiences and how we as the adults in their village can support them. I also want to mention that when you're thinking about NIL, I know a lot of you are also thinking about amateurism and how do they go together, right? And kids have to fill out the amateurism survey when they register with the NCAA Eligibility Center. And then they have to do it again their senior year in the spring to kind of like wrap that up and finish their certification. So the key, and I know Tim can talk more about this, but I just want to talk about the initial piece of it is that name, image, likeness is that you are getting a benefit for your name or your image, right? It's not to play, right? You're not getting paid to play. And that is one of the key pieces of amateurism is you're not a professional athlete. And then, another key thing is like, do not get an agent, right? Like if you have an agent managing you, that will really mess with your amateurism. And so, Tim, I think it'd be really helpful for the listeners to understand, like, what's the difference between an agent and a financial advisor, or these other things that you're recommending they pursue.
And I think we need to make a distinction between the college level and the high school level. So the NCAA, uh, uh, basically every state law that was written for the states around NIL for college athletes is determines the situation as it relates to agents or not. For the majority of the United States, college athletes can now retain marketing agents to help them market and do their NIL deals. What they cannot do is they cannot hire an agent to be representing them to sign a deal with a professional sports team. So that's the distinction at the college level, and at the high school level also it varies, right? Some states there's no indication as to whether or not a student athlete can have an agent or not. Some states are very specific as it relates to what the student athletes can and can't do, which is why it's so important to make sure that that everyone's up to date on the specifics of the state that they're participating in. In any event, state law, if the state law says that a student athlete can hire an agent to help them, like it does in the state of Texas, for example, then that would trump any bylaw or anything the NCAA would say. So it's a very fluid question and comment there, Joyce.
That's awesome. Thank you for the clarity there. I just realized it didn't really address the mental health issue question, so I just want to go back to that real quick. Are we working with student athletes to address mental health issues? Absolutely. So a number of things that Honest Game does to support that student athlete mental health is, number one, being proactive, ensuring they have short-term achievable goals. By giving them, like, if you get, B's this term, your GPA will be this, helping them understand the different college athletic pathways so they don't feel hamstrung to only be looking at one specific type of college, encouraging them to think about college and their post-secondary pathway really early. And when you start earlier, there's a little bit less pressure because you have more time. When you have more time, it allows you to be proactive and to kind of say, okay, well, these are my goals. And if I want to do X, then I need to do A, B, C. And that really supports kids in just kind of like taking it one step at a time and not feeling overwhelmed. Our reports are really designed to be understandable by anybody. You don't need to understand academic eligibility to understand our reports. We've got coaches pulling up our reports online on their phones during practices, going over them with the kids on the sidelines. Do you understand what this means? Yes, green is good, right? Like keeping it really digestible for the kids and giving them that ability to feel hope. So the language in our software is very positive. If you are not on your way to D1 eligibility, what about D2? What about NAIA? There's JUCO, there's NCAA, there's D3. So encouraging kids to see past what they see on TV and understanding there's a lot of different opportunities out there for you if you want to keep playing sports at the next level. So Tim, the next one I think is for you. I'm a high school athletic director in a state that NIL is prohibited as of now. I know it's coming soon, so I got my agent license for the state. What are some of the foundations I should have in place when it is passed to ensure I can assist my student athletes? I would love to learn more to protect my high school athletes, but would also like to get more involved on the NCAA side as well.
Well, that's very very forward thinking. And the first step that you need to do is sign up and become a member of the NIL playbook at eckersports.com, because that will give you all the information that you need as it relates to the state laws, the high school bylaws, and those things. The second thing is really understanding, making sure that you have support from a legal perspective, so that somebody that can review contracts and make suggestions and negotiate deals on behalf of agents that you have if you yourself don't have a law degree, and then also a financial analyst and a financial plan. I think those are the things that are really important. Then beyond that, what we see is helping student athletes understand how to build their digital brand, and being able to figure out how to you create something that would be attractive to others, so that they can increase the followers, so they increase the value of their deals. Those are the three things that I would stay focused on. As I mentioned, at the Eccker Sports NIL playbook, all of that information would be available to you.
And getting more involved on the NCAA side to support your student athletes, definitely engaging with Honest Game software. having your students being tracked starting freshman year, even your, freshmen, we track all student athletes at a school, so there's no surprises, right? You could grow a foot during your high school career, or really students come out of the woodworks at the end of their high school career. And what we don't want is surprises with NCAA eligibility. We also provide a lot of training for staff and students and families. So we can do live webinars, we can do recording libraries, we can do in-person sessions to educate. Because what we want to do is make sure that everybody knows how to feel empowered and take control of their own recruiting and academics and NIL, right? To make sure that you know what to do, so you're not feeling like you need to, have somebody else do it for you, or that you're feeling powerless. Tim, this one's for you. What about setting a partnership with your parents, but your parents are a majority owner? Would that affect the financial aid for student athletes?
So if it was a partnership between the student athlete and the parents, if the parent was claiming that student athlete on their as a dependent, it certainly would, right? If they're not complaining, but again, here's where we kind of get to the point where I am not a tax attorney, and I'm not a financial advisor. But generally speaking, to the extent that you are earning money, that money has to be accounted for, and could potentially affect financial aid grants and values of things. It doesn't mean you couldn't get one, but it might impact the amounts and things like that.
Yeah, and one thing I do know about FAFSA, right, is they're looking at the family's income and assets and the students. And generally, if the student has a lot of assets, it counts against them more than it would if those assets are in the parent's name. So, it's definitely going to affect your financial aid package, but if it's in the student's name, it will be counted as more than if it is in the parent's name.
That's a great point.
More questions. Does trademarking your name hurt a student athlete from NIL deals?
I don't know how that would hurt. I think what trademarking does is it gives you the ability to own whatever that trademark is, so that you can negotiate and leverage the value of it. For example, LeBron James' son trademarked Bronny, right? That's kind of his nickname, his way of representing himself. And so, if there are certain entities out there that would be appropriate for him to interact with, because he owns that trademark, it could give him more negotiation power as he negotiated his deal with whatever entity would be interested in that. So generally speaking, I don't think it would hurt. I do think it would, though, benefit the student athlete, because it gives them control of their trademark, so that they can leverage that control and negotiate against it.
Awesome. Next question is for Tim. Does the NFHS have a stance on NIL? Or are they just saying to listen to the state associations? States would have final say, but just wondering if NFHS is on one side or the other.
I think they both ways. as Randy would say, they feel strongly both ways. So the leadership at the NFHS has made very specific statements over the course of the last year that they do not believe high school student athletes should be able to participate in name, image, and likeness. And you can go and look at some of their documentation on their website, and some of the letters that Carissa wrote over the last year indicating that stance. However, recently they have been listening to the state athletic associations, and now 19 of them have approved NIL for the high school market. And so they are also in search of NIL education and materials and things like that. So on one side, the leadership doesn't believe NIL for the high school level is a good thing. But on the other side, recognizing that a lot of their members are moving in that direction, that they've got to provide some sort of assistance to them to that. And I'm not sure what their plan is to do on that.
So Tim, if you are a coach and a financial advisor, can you assist your student athletes with NIL deals?
It depends on the state that you're in. So some states allow coaches to help organize and arrange NIL deals for student athletes. Some states do not. So as an example, in Oklahoma, if you're a coach in Oklahoma, or if you're a coach in Texas, you cannot help organize an NIL deal for a student athlete. If you're in California, you can. So again, it comes back to the state law and understanding what the actual state law is. And if there is no state law, there are some states that don't have NIL state laws, like Alabama, for example. They created a state law, but then they repealed it. In the case where there's no state law, then there's nothing that would prevent it. But again, it comes down to that question. If you go to the resource hub at eckersports.com and click on the state that you're interested in and go pull up the actual state law and read through it, it will be very specific as to whether or not coaches and employees of the universities or the high schools have the ability to help arrange those deals or not.
Awesome. So Tim, besides being informed and connecting with student athletes, using Eccker Sports or Honest Game, what do you see as the AD's role with NIL?
That's a really good question. So I think the athletic director's role is to create a policy and procedure on how to manage name, image, and likeness on a day-to-day basis within your student base, right? Within your whether it's one high school or multiple high schools. The responsibility is to how do we set this up so that we prevent the things that we talked about that people are concerned about, people transferring from one school to the other. What's the process that we put in place for if a kid does have an opportunity to do something around name, image, and likeness? How do they report that? And then helping provide guidance and education to both the coaches, the student athletes, and the families so that they don't go astray of either state law or any athletic association bylaws. So what we've done in a few of the states that we've worked with, and we're happy to do this for you, and you contact us at Eccker Sports, is help to create the NIL policy and procedure for your high school so that everybody understands what's the position of the high school, what's the current bylaws of that state athletic association, what are the current state laws, and what are things to know about as it relates to that, and then how do you want to actually activate that on a day-to-day basis. And the two things that we're trying to help people do, we're trying to help administrators and educators manage through the NIL process on a day-to-day basis, and we're trying to help families and student athletes be able to reap the rewards of what's out there for the ones that can actually participate in it.
That's awesome, Tim. And I think like for most of the people on the call are educators. And what we're trying to do at Honest Game and Eccker is educate, right? And we're trying to inspire your student athletes. We're trying to use their passion for sport to motivate them in the classroom. We're trying to use their passion for sport to get them educated so that they can make the right choices for their future. And what we're trying to do is meet kids where they are, right? And make your lives as staff members easier, save you time, ensure that you're giving the proper information because it's really hard. Information changes constantly, state by state, right? Like COVID waiver, COVID no waiver. Like it's just bouncing around and you can't expect to be an expert in everything. And that's where we all come in because, right, Eccker is an expert in NIL and Scheme is an expert with academic eligibility. We have a couple more questions and then we're going to have to wrap it up. Tim, how much is the Eccker playbook for students and parents?
$50. So there's a $50 membership fee for an annual license to the Eccker Sports NIL playbook. If you order now, between now and November 11th, you get $25 off of that. So it'd be $25 for your family to have access to all the information that we talked about. And then the last question is, Tim, you mentioned they need to report their NIL deals to AD, and the question is, why is that? That's because it's either mandated by state law or mandated by the interpretation of the bylaws in some states. Some states it's not required, some states it is. So again, this goes back to if the state wrote an NIL law specific to NIL deals that requires the reporting of those deals to the either athletic department or university, then they have to do that. If in the bylaws, the High School Athletic Association also requires, there's some states where they require that all deals be reported so that they can have a visibility so that they can prevent the competitive inequity stuff that we talked about.
Awesome. And why would, if you think about it, like why would you have a law like that that a student would need to report those to the AD? And it's probably to protect the student, right? Like the laws are drawn up to protect the students, right?
Yeah, I would say, Joyce, the biggest thing people worry about other than the competitive equity is that a student agrees to do something for some entity and it shows up and then something bad happens, right? So we need to protect the young people in these situations. So that's why they ask that those deals be reported before the student athlete actually goes and does them, so that there's a parent involved that can help make sure that those things are all legit.
That's right. And then what is the cost associated with Honest Game? So for individuals, you can get unlimited reporting for $160. And again, there's a 10% off membership here. With schools, it's a student by student basis. And so we would track all your student athletes for between $3 to $6 a student, depending on your school and how you want that to roll out. And so we all, Eccker and Honest Game are here to support you in an affordable way. And we want to really help all of your student athletes reach their fullest potential and get to where they want to go after their high school career is over. Tim, is there anything you wanted to add before we close it out?
Just really appreciate the time and the opportunity to talk to you about what we're trying to do. We're here to help. As we say with our friends in Texas, we're here to help the coaches help the kids. And we would like to be that for you, your trusted partner. And please feel free to reach out to us at our website or through our all the stuff that we have out there. So thank you very much. And Joyce, thank you so much for having us. And we feel so honored to be able to work with you guys closely on things like this, because our companies are so aligned with trying to help that it's an honor to be with you guys. And great job today. Thank you.
Thank you too. Ditto, right back at you. Everybody, you can go to honestgame.com to get more information, and we look forward to hearing from you. We'll be following up with recording of the webinar, additional content that you can share with your student athletes and families, and we look forward to the next time we see you guys. Have a good one.
Thank you. Have a nice day.